over the years, I've tried to be in the habit of being ready in season and out of season, because Richard will pop up last minute and be like, hey, you got something to share? So it's always good to be ready. Sometimes I'll come up with an idea, something I'll want to share. It'll be really heavy on my heart. And be like, oh, okay, next time he asks, I'll share it. And then I forget, which is what I did this time. But anyway, the Lord has a way of making those things work out. And in trying to pray about what to share, and of course my approach is not to be cliche, and I don't like sharing stuff I've shared in the past or something that I think you've heard already. So, but of all the subject matters that came up, and the one that really seemed to ring for me over the past several days is work. So it's not probably the depth of a lesson that everybody would be longing for on a Sunday morning. But it's a part of our lives. You know, it's one of these things that we just kind of do and pays the bills. It's better than farming. Every time somebody complains about, oh, I got to do this, well, you could farm. You could be getting up 4 a.m. milking that cow for that milk, or you can just go down to Publix, you know, pay $5 and go that route. So in that respect, work is kind of a holy thing. I'd rather this and farming for sure. But it was funny. So Richard's asking for a title, so I'm trying to figure out what to talk about, and this guy's asking for a title now. So I come back with by the sweat of your brow, and there's this long pause. And I get a text message back from him, and it says, this isn't about performance, is it? It's like, no. But I think we overlook, because of that, we overlook the value in work. You know, there's a holiness in it if you really take the time to understand what the Lord's building in us. And I can go through a laundry list of different verses. You could just as easily Google them and look them up. But from story to story, from the moment that God creates man, he puts him in a place and gives him something to do. So if the word work aggravates you in some way, replace it with action, because we're always doing an action. You just took communion, that's an action. That's work. Okay, so follow me in the actions and deeds aspect of it, not this pressure of starting to perform, because we praying for revival, somebody's going to have to be here until the lights get turned off. That's going to be work for somebody. I've been to revivals where that happens, where they start flipping the light switch at 1 a.m. because you need to get out, because we need to vacuum the place, because somebody's got to go to work. So from the beginning, God creates man, puts him in a garden to maintain that. And he sins, and so from then on, if you're going to eat, you're going to have to sweat to do it. You're going to have to work in some capacity to be able to eat. And then the next story you go into is Cain and Abel. And Cain's offering is rejected while Abel's is accepted. It's not super clear why, but there's this sense that Cain didn't do what he's supposed to do. There's an action he should have taken that would have made the difference in his offering being pleasing or not. And you can go on with that. Noah had to build a boat. Then Noah had to plant a vineyard. There's always some action to be taken. David had to build a kingdom. People have to build armies. There's always an action to be taken. Now, that seems pretty basic and it seems pretty fundamental, but how you take that action makes a really big difference in things. I don't know if you've guys seen, there used to be that show, Dirty Jobs. I don't know if it's still on the air or not. But basically, it's just this one guy follows all these other people doing the worst possible jobs you can imagine doing. But these people seem to like live in their world of doing grease traps, right? And it was something that he said that I thought was interesting, is that everybody's like, well, chase your, your bliss, or do what makes you happy, or. And he said what he found consistently with these people was that this guy wasn't in love with cleaning grease traps. But he did make a point to do it really, really well. And if you start looking at who we are to be in Christ, and if we're supposed to behave on earth as we're going to in heaven, then the behaviors that we will execute in heaven have to be here. If you're in heaven doing a job, you're going to cut corners on that? You're going to do a shoddy job? Why would you do the same thing here? Why would you not put as much effort into something? There's all the time, all the time. I grew up being really lazy. I always remember being lazy. I never wanted to do anything. If it made me break a sweat, I wasn't interested. And I couldn't figure out why in 6th grade I was such a fat little kid. So then you start becoming active, and you start having to walk places or do things or do whatever, and things change. So I didn't like walking, but if I went the distances that I had to, it got me where I needed to be. And you start seeing the value. Now, some things take a lot of work. And it's hard to see the value in that work sometimes. But I promise you, if you do the thing you kind of don't want to do and you do it poorly, you're going to do it again. And way sooner than you would have, which costs you more money sooner than you would have. Why? Well, you didn't do the work. You didn't put the action in. You didn't spend the time. Now, please take into consideration your abilities, your gifts, your aptitude, your whatever. Because God created people to work. When people were set to build the tabernacle or Solomon's temple, God gifted them with abilities and skills. You have these gifts of abilities and skills to utilize. Not just within the church. Because part of the ways that you exhibit Christ in the world is not by doing things half-heartedly. You know what Jesus would do? Jesus wouldn't half-heart it. We need to be all in the things that we're doing. If only for this one fact that it makes it go faster. Anytime you're fully engaged in something, you're really in it. Am I knocking stuff over? Yep. It's like scientifically proven. Your brain kicks in on a different level, and time feels like it's moving faster. I don't want to mop that floor. I don't want to mop that floor. I work at a Polk Museum of Art now, so we had to get ready for the summer camp for the kids. So museum's been there for a while, and I find when I'm assigned to a certain task, it's usually an area that it's been neglected for a little bit. So I have found that, well, what else am I going to do? And I'll go in and every crack and every crevice, every place, I figure, you know what, nobody's been here in 30 years. So I make this effort to go through and do this, just the extra, And because I know who's going to come back and clean this thing. When I was doing service work all the time, it was always easier to do the job right as if whoever the next guy shows up says, man, all right, cool, he did it right. That's what I wanted, right? And I figured eventually, either sowing that seed will eventually bless somebody so well that they'll try to do a good job. So when I come back and service this thing in another couple of years, that it's in a way that's functional. And I found that over and over. Every time I had to do work after a guy who did it half-hearted, it cost me more time. It didn't do the customer any service by doing that. Well, because they had to call somebody else out to do it. So you start seeing this pattern of trying to do and approach things with excellence. And what's amazing about that is if you think about it, if you have an entire group of people who have this mentality, and everybody just does that like one other extra little thing, try to be fully engaged. You know what? Ma'am, I usually don't do this for people, but today you're the one I'm choosing to be nice to. In business, I like getting the idea of, be a hero once a day. Just like be somebody's hero. Okay, you know what? Normally a thing I wouldn't do, I'm gonna do that just for you because whatever. And just that extra little bit of extra work always seemed to make everything easier. Well, and depending on what you do, people tip better that way as well. I found that out too. So there's blessings all around on this if you do it right. But all right, so you get the idea, right? If you do the extra, do a little more. There's people, you ever see people that say they're in ministry, but like, not, there's just something, they spill stuff, let other people clean it up, or always delegating when it's a servant job. Yeah. Anyway. Performance. Just be ready, because you don't have to perform, but there will be a time where somebody's going to need your help, and it might be a revival here, or it might be in a situation where somebody's broke down on the side of the road. If you're that guy, if you're that person, what would you want done? Live that life. That's always fun. Choose a little extra, but it saves you on the back end. Which leads me into this. I'll have to check the theological reasoning for my using this, but I think the story can be applied this way. Sower of the seed. Everybody's heard the story, right? You got the sower, and he's throwing seed out, and the seed lands here and here and here. Who's the sower? Are we? We can be. From a particular perspective, yes. We're the sowers. We've got the seed. We throw it, right? Some of it finds good ground. Some of it finds thorny ground. Some of it's got stony ground. Now, nowadays, of course, in the States, it's all systemized. So they get the absolute most out of every single seed, right? So it's placed in a little spot in this little mountain, and it's stuck down a certain length, and it's watered, and it's cared for. I don't think they were that stringent back then. If you're just throwing it and tossing it, right? So, and you can break down the story, and I like doing this. I like the idea that you can look at these biblical stories, and of course, coming from a Hebrew mindset, it has that flexibility to put yourself in different shoes within the story, right? So you've got the sower, and if the sower's us, or you, let's say, and you've got your bag of seed, and you're tossing your seed out, sounds like work, don't it? You're going to work. Okay, so you're throwing the seed out, and depending on where you throw the seed determines of how well that seed responds. So, and that could be you witnessing in the world, and a story about how the people on their end, how they're going to receive what you're saying, and based on their scenarios is going to determine how they respond, right? Okay. But if the sower is God, and he's throwing seed out, And as you read the story, it talks about the seed and how the seed, some of it, you get a return, 30, 60, 100-fold on some of the seed. Some of it dies. So that good return is really, really important. Right? So if God's throwing seed out, you think he's skimpy with throwing the seed out? You think he throws out just a little bit? Because he's really not sure what ground's hard or what's soft, or they're not necessarily tilling it in that particular same way, right? But they're just throwing seed out. Man, if you're generous, if you think God's going to withhold on the seed when he's trying to get a harvest? Why are we so stingy? It's the debt of love, right? That's all we owe each other, is a debt of love. Well, there's generosity in that. Not the point of hurting yourself. I've known people that they give all, and they I want to say play that game. It's a way I say things. That's not necessarily how I mean in walking in your faith, but people will have the faith to lay it all out there. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. You definitely learn a lesson either way, because that's what work does. Helps you learn things. I guess I bring all this up because it's important as believers that we walk in a certain level of excellence, I think. And I think when we do that extra and we do that thing that reflects well on the Lord, there's no drawback. It either blesses you later, because we all know life can be secular, so you're always going to revisit these scenarios and situations. But even in your work, don't be skimpy. Be generous in your work. Do a good job. Don't spend several hours text messaging. I mean, you have your life to live and all, and understand, but you're not just taking care of your family. You're representing a behavior and a concept and an idea. And if you think we're just going to be floating around on clouds once we get up to heaven, being fed stars and fanned with galaxies or something, I mean, we're going to be working. We're all going to have a purpose and something to do, the same way we do now. It might be a little more clear then, but we have to dig our way through the world now to help clarify what that focus is, what that understanding is, what that calling is. And that's going to involve work. Now I have to be careful, because if I start into something, even if it's like a project at the house, I can get so deep into it because, well, everything I touch has a thing. And before you know it, the whole day's gone. But this is the work I needed to do to get to this next place. None of you are here without work. Spiritual work, mental work, emotional work. It's taken work for you people to get here. Passion, suffering means the same thing. We have all suffered in some labor of some sort to get where we're at now. The struggle may not be as much, but if we do the work on the front end, if we do it first, we don't have to do it again later. It's one of the things in the walk that I've learned. It's like you get through a couple of years and you're revisiting the same scenarios. The faces might be different. The characters are the same. They're just different faces. Oh, here's that scenario again. I always think back, well, how did I do it last time? Did I half-heart it last time? If I did, I'm going to double down this time, make sure it's right. So, in your doing, try to take that extra step. And, come on, if you're going to love your enemy, I've loved my enemy and not been overly joyful in doing so, but I still love them. It was a little bit of work. But fast forward, and all of a sudden all those feelings are kind of squelched. Those attitudes have kind of been rounded off a little bit. And you start seeing that, well, if I take that extra step that I think the Lord would do. And I'm not even talking about, these aren't major things. Like, we talk about writing. Writing's work. You want to know how to write? Strap yourself to a chair for a month and start typing. That's how you type. But the discipline that it takes, the work, the action that it takes to sit in that spot, deal with those emotions when they come up, put them on a piece of paper or screen or whatever people use nowadays, that's work. And that's why nobody likes to write, because it's work. And then you have to reread it because you missed something. You misspelled something. There's not a period. There's not a comma. Fringe benefit of doing the extra while working. When you do that, you get yourself in the habit of, all right, let me just do one more thing. All right, I'm just going to wash that. I'm going to wash this plate I just used, but I'm going to wash that other Tupperware thing that's been sitting there since this morning. And every time you do that little extra, all of a sudden the little extra is not a big deal anymore. And it's not hard, and you've just expanded your capacity to be better and improve. So no, we can't just go picking fruit off of the trees anymore to sustain ourselves. We have to struggle a little bit. There has to be some sort of resistance for you to get stronger. You ever see anybody who's been babied their whole life? They are big babies. But have you seen people who had to struggle, they had to work? Especially the ones who've leaned into it, the ones that voluntarily take that burden on, because it changes their character. Because you've seen people who like don't want to do something, they get into it, you can tell. They don't want to do it, but and they're fighting it as they're like, and then the other people that see the resistance and lean into it. Both take work. All right, that's about it. Unless anybody's got any questions, I'm pretty well done. So take the extra steps that you need to really glorify the Lord in your actions and the small bits of work that you're doing. I don't necessarily make a distinction between work and what's holy anymore. The worlds are the same. They're not, one's feeding the other. What I'm doing at work is helping feed my spiritual, while I'm using the spiritual to help better improve my work. So, yeah, that's it. All right, go.
Thanks, Pete.